Hey there, good morning. This is Steve. I'm here with another story. This one though is a Father's Day story, it's Father's Day special. And I'm in a different area. I'm about a mile from my mother's house. And it's early morning. I came here early morning because I didn't live in this neighborhood, so I'm afraid that someone might see this old fart sitting on the curb and be concerned. So I'm here like 5:30 in the morning. So I came here to have a little bit of a story that relates to Father's Day. And before we do though, the reason I came here is because it's going to involve this house and my stepbrother Harry. But since I'm here, this is the high school I went to, right here. They're doing this big reconstruction on the athletic fields. There's the elementary school I went to right there, Esther Lindstrom Elementary School. The girl I had a crush on from like second to sixth grade lives down there on the same street, but down there on that side. My first girlfriend, that would actually be considered a girlfriend, lived down there, Rhonda. Anyway, so that's the place, that's the setting. So this story involves, and I got my soda cracker shirt on from my concert the other night. This story involves Harry. And it involves a whole bunch, but I'm going to center it on Harry. Harry was, I always thought of him as my uncle. I always kind of referred to him as my uncle, but actually he was my stepbrother. He's older than me, 15 years. And I never, as a kid, I don't even think I ever met him as a kid. But here's some family history that's might cause your head to spin. My parents, my dad and my mother, got a divorce in about 1970, so I was, 9 years old. And even though I remember hearing about Harry, I never met him. I'm always confused at family relations. You're going to find out in a minute why. But my father had an uncle, Uncle Bruce, and Bruce is about 13 years older than my dad. And so when my mom and dad divorced, there was this guy, Bruce, who ended up dating my mother, and that guy was also my uncle. See, I'm very confused now. So, but anyway, and my dad really revered Bruce a lot, and he really liked Bruce. In fact, one of the good things is once Bruce and my mom got married, my dad always said this till the very end. He said, I always knew that you guys were in good hands, because he loved Bruce, adored Bruce. And also the cool thing about that, I didn't have to change my name, same name, Fisher. But Bruce was Harry's father. But unfortunately, and I've mentioned this before, and I don't know if you know me, you know about this, and maybe I've mentioned this, but there is parental alienation in my life, and I've become an unfortunate expert, and I won't go into detail there. But there was also in Harry's life, in Bruce's life. And so let me tell you, I guess I should shift over to Bruce for a minute. So Bruce, when he was younger, was kind of a wild child. We have pictures of him on a motorcycle, and the guy looked like a maniac. If you saw the movie Wild Ones with Brandon, not Brandon, who's that guy? Oh, the name is almost there on my lips. Marlon Brando, that's it. If you see that movie, it's about these wild, desperate motorcycle riders, 1953. And if you see that's the kind of lifestyle Bruce led, and he was kind of wild. But as he got older, he was just so wonderful, so nice. Everyone adored Bruce. Like after he died, my mom, started going to the bank. Bruce did all that. So I went to the bank, went to the supermarket. And she just kept getting hit with the same question, like, where's your husband? And she'd have to tell these people, and sometimes they'd cry. And she brought me to the bank once, and and they'd already kind of established that Bruce was no longer around, and I was introduced. I was almost like a celebrity. Oh, come here, that's Mr. Fisher's son right there, So that's Bruce. So Bruce is this wonderful guy, and you think, well, how could a wonderful guy like him? Now, he was a wild guy when he was younger, but how could his son not want anything to do with him? Well, when he was a wild young man, at I guess 18, he got a girl pregnant. Okay, who I'm assuming was the same age, but she was wild, and she was a motorcycle chick, and apparently had schizophrenia. So I think there was that element. And one thing about parental alienation, there tends to be mental illness, as there is in my case. Not me. Yeah, I don't want to talk about that. But so Harry, I never really met Harry, even though I'd heard about him, because he wouldn't have anything to do with his dad because of this parental alienation. So Harry's was about 15 years older than me. So, I mean, in the 60s, he was like I was 10, but he was, 25, let's say. And so I'm getting bogged down. Okay, so Bruce was in the family, but I didn't meet him very often because Bruce was in the Merchant Marines. Now Bruce, he went into the Merchant Marines, he lied about his age in World War II and got in the Merchant Marines, and so he would be off at sea for weeks or months. So that explains why I didn't see him. So it's a good story. I'm telling you this is because it's Father's Day and it's a good story. So when Harry met, around 1970, I think, he got married to Ruth. She also lived here, of course, and in about 73, Bruce got married to my mom. So one thing that sometimes breaks the cycle of parental alienation is where there's either a spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, or maybe in this case a mother. Various other people get involved. And I think what happened is Ruth just kind of wonders, like, why don't you want to have anything to do with your dad? And probably went something like this: he's kind of an asshole, whatever. I just never knew him, or that kind of thing. So Ruth was pushing from that end, and my mom was pushing from the other end, saying, let's get these guys together. And so it didn't happen overnight. It's like when, you can imagine someone being in a cult. You can't just say, hey, you're in a cult, get out of the cult, and have them, expect them to change overnight. And I'm using that as an analogy, but, you're under this cloud of disinformation from a trusted source, in this case, a parent. And that's what Harry kind of lived his life with. So once that happened, once this transition happened, I did start to know Harry quite a bit, because he and his dad hung out a bit, and I was there. I went with them. In fact, Harry gave me my first job when I was 15. Well, let me tell you. Okay, let me back up. Okay, I've got all these details that I've been rehearsing. So, so Harry was like he was a larger than life character. He had one driving passion throughout his whole life, and that one driving passion was motorcycles. The guy was just a nut about motorcycles. And it's so much so that almost every job he ever had involved motorcycles. And get this, he was the head of the leader, actually they call him Commodore, of this motorcycle stunt team. And this motorcycle stunt team, it wasn't like, motocross jumps, that kind of thing. They had big Harley Davidson motorcycles, and they did these really highly choreographed stunts. And then sometimes they'd start parades, like if you go to a parade, many different parades, Hollywood Parade was one of them, they would start with this big elaborate stunt, and they had all these various components to it. They'd get a pyramid of like 4 riders, and then 3 standing on the 4 shoulders, and then 2 standing on those 3 shoulders, and then 1 guy on the very top, and they'd ride down the street, and all the crowd would go wild. But Harry started doing this in the 60s, and he was the leader of this motor corps then called Huntington Park. And then it's somewhere around 1970, early 70s, he switched over, and he formed a motorcycle group called the Victor McClellan Motorcycle Corps, VMMC. Victor McClellan was a movie star in the 1930s that rode motorcycles, and for whatever reason they named it after him. I don't think I think he was dead before they even started, but that's what they called it, Victor McClellan. So in fact, so Harry has just been involved in motorcycles from kind of more on the side through this stunt team. He also had motorcycles. He had them here. He had a 64 Harley Davidson, what was it called? Hydroglide? No, Motor Glide. I can't remember, but some cool bikes here. But not choppers. He wasn't like, even in the 60s, he wasn't a chopper guy. He was he was like he just did these stunts. For a while, the Victor McClellan Motor Corps they held the world record for the amount of people on one motorcycle, 22. And he had all these crazy, Harry was the stunt double for Eric Estrada and Chips, in the reunion of Chips in the early 80s. Always did these, things related to motorcycles. And then eventually, and that's when I worked with him, he got me, he bought this company out in Fullerton that reconditions motorcycle generators that generate electricity on a motorcycle, and they were on Harleys. So he would collect these old generators from motorcycle shops in the area, bring them in, redo them, bring them back to the motorcycle shop would then sell them to other people, that kind of thing. So that was my first job. I went out there and I sandblasted parts and took them apart and stuff like that. So that's just Harry. And then, in the, let me think, when would that have been? Later, might have been early 80s. They bought a company. Well, he was already doing motorcycle escorts for funerals. So he had this, so he did the motor corps on the side, and they did make money, although his son has told me, not much. It was more about passion. But so he tried to incorporate as much as he could into business. So he and the motorcycle corps, several members of the motorcycle corps, would do these funeral processions where they would, and you probably have seen it, where there's a big procession of cars, and you probably think they're police. They're not. They're some private group that directs traffic. So Harry would ride up, whistle in mouth, get the cars to stop and stuff, and the procession goes by. So he did that. But then in somewhere early 80s, they bought a limousine company in Bellflower right here. And he was kind of like he provided cars, a lot of times for funerals, not always, and also the procession, the escorts, motorcycle escorts. And of course, he always did the escorts. I drove the limousines. There's other people, but I was one of the drivers. So that was my another job he gave me. But Harry was this larger-than-life guy, and as you can imagine, larger-than-life guys, when he would be at a party, he'd be at a party, like a family gathering. He'd be there. He just, I don't know, just garnered attention. I was thinking this morning, when I came up with some of the ideas about this, there was a quote about President Theodore Roosevelt, that he was kind of this kind of guy. And the quote is that when he would attend a wedding, he would upstage the bride and groom, a funeral, the corpse. And that was kind of that was the great quote. That was kind of Harry. So, but anyway, they started getting closer and closer, Harry and his dad, Bruce, and I was just calling him my dad, but he's my stepdad. And to the point where, and I'm the same way, I guess, and maybe all men are the same way, the sense that I'm not great with emotions, and so I didn't know really exactly how Harry felt about me. So one time when I was probably in my 30s, I just called him and say, "Hey, Harry, you want to just go to lunch? Let's talk, you and me." And it was kind of cool. It really, I think he kind of thought I had animosity towards him. I thought he had it towards me. But whatever it was, we cleared the air, and he was just a wonderful man. And when my stepfather, Bruce, his father, died, we had this moment on the boat. Well, we had Bruce had him cremated and threw his ashes at sea, which I thought was very fitting for Bruce. And on the way back, Harry and I we were standing there on the boat, and he just cried, and I'm crying right now thinking about it. And he just said he was a real good man. And I want to go back to parental alienation. I give credit to Ruth and my mom for kind of forcing that relationship to get back on track. And I'm hoping the same happens in my case. So I went way over my time. I'm going to cut it here. Thank you. Happy Father's Day.